Good evening, everybody. Namaste, and welcome to Words of Wisdom Gyan Ganga. This is Sunday, February 5th. This is our 185th episode, and we are going to talk about what else? Budget 2023, an analysis. We have Dr. Swamy with us. We have our resident expert, Dr. Arvind Chaturvedi, and we have another very good expert from Money Life, Debashis Basu. So we're going to start off, Dr. Swamy. We're just going to quickly start off. I'm just going to make a quick comment and then hand it over to you. And so I just want to lead in with what you tweeted as soon as the budget was presented. You just said it was nothing but a grocery shopkeeper's bill. And in a budget, instead of being just a list of bills, it should have four important items to it. So we're going to listen to you as to what those four important items are, and then we hand it over to Arvind and Debashis to have a powwow and see how well the budget was presented, and have some interesting discussions after that. Viewers, we will try to do a Q&A. I'm not promising anything yet because it's going to be a pretty full program today. So if possible, we will take a few questions. And so with this, Dr. Swamy, it's over to you now.
Thanks, Ramesh. It's actually a pleasure to have our two guests. Both of them are specialists in the field of economics from different dimensions.
You need to bring the mic a little bit closer. I'm sorry.
Yes.
You can put it in the pocket, Dr. Swamy. I think there's some issue. I don't think it's turned on. Can you make sure if it's turned on?
It is turned on.
Is it blinking?
It's just green.
Okay, it's fine. Okay. It's fine? Okay, good. Okay, good.
I think there's something wrong with your...
You're right.
So you see, the budget comes every year, and every year, for some reason which is unnecessary, the finance minister makes a speech now. After Nirmala Sitharaman came, it is 2 hours and things like that. In most countries, the budget is placed as a document, and then there's a discussion in the Parliament or the Senate and House of Representatives. So, from all this kind of point of view, ours is I've been trying for years to convince people that you must restructure the budget. Not I will give you a little this and I'll give you that and so on. So I have been saying over and over again that there are four dimensions to any budget or any program, any 5-year plan, anything. There are four dimensions which you have to work on. Number one, what are your objectives? What are you trying to achieve? Growth rate is an objective, but it's not stated in the budget documents or anything of Niti Aayog or whatever as an objective. It says one day they will say 6%, another says 5%. Now in this budget they have said 7%, but in the Parliament presentation is 6.5%, and in the IMF they will say 6%. I mean, it's just arbitrary. There's a way to calculate the growth rate, and that is by knowing what the GDP is, and then find out from that how much is it. Let me tell you, and I've challenged the my own party on this, and nobody has been able to reply to me. From 2016, that is after 2015, the growth rate of which was in 2016, 2015-16, the financial year, our growth rate had gone to 8%. Then it came down, 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 down. And in 2020, the first quarter, that is January 1 to 31st March, because there are 4 quarters, and they are each quarter has 3 months. So January, February, March. These three, compared to the previous year's January, February, March, the growth rate in 2020 was just 4% and nothing more. And in fact, 3.8 or something like that. Now, this growth rate has not been improved on. So what happened is that Corona, everything went down. So the recovery is being claimed as an achievement. So if you compare the 2022 to dash 23 with 2019-20, the growth rate is only 2% per year. If you just take that way, we have done this before in my Gyan Ganga calculations, but now I have to say it because the people are being misled, and there's nothing in there's no chapter on growth rates. Growth rate not only of GDP but agricultural sector, mining sector, the manufacturing sector, construction, services. These all have to be given separately so that you know how the thing. Now, so there's nothing about that. The second thing is that you must tell your priorities. What's your priorities? Agriculture priority, small industry your priority, the public your priority, the land, the workers that there are there. Some of them in the formal sector, some in the informal sector. Is that your thing, or is your hunger issue, or is it inequality? There must be some priorities. Say this is my policy, which is not. There's no discussion whatsoever in the budget documents that this is our priority. Well, you want to build roads, that's a priority. So say that this is my thing and we are allocating so much. There is nothing of the kind. Is defense a priority? It should be, because the Chinese have come and gobbled 4,000 square kilometers of your territory. Are you going to do that? And I look at the there's a thing called where the rupee goes. It comes in the budget documents, and according to this, the as a ratio of GDP, it is the lowest since 1962. So where is the defense preparedness? Why is it so? And in defense, there's salaries, there are pensions, all these things are there, and then the machinery. So that the capital account is woeful. Are we so complacent that today defense, and it's not that the army is not asking for it, navy is asking for it, air force is asking for it. their defense ministry sends their own budget requirements. All that is chopped. I don't know where the budget is formed, by the way. It's not in the finance ministry, because one of the people I know, when since he was a student in economics, he has been in the finance ministry, and I think he's just left or something. And from what he tells me, it appears to me that even the finance ministry, nobody knows in this structure way. So priority is the second thing. What's your priority? Is it agriculture? Is it manufacturing? Is it services? These things are not being stated. I think it should be agriculture, because agriculture is still about 45% of your GDP. I mean, excuse me, the agricultural population is 45% of the total population, and as a part of GDP proportion, it's still around 20. It goes a little up and down in the recent years. So therefore, it's such a big chunk, and where so many people are staying there, it should get a priority, and it should have got it in 1947. And Jawaharlal Nehru and followed the Russian model and sunk us. It's only when Narasimha Rao came and moved, to some extent, Chandrasekhar also removed, but Narasimha Rao was there full 5 years. He completely removed all these controls, licenses, everything. And that's how we went from what was called the Hindu rate of growth of 3.5% all the way to 8%. And in my opinion, you must grow 10% per year for 10 years. For what that, there is a calculus. How much investment do you need? How much efficiency you need? What are the innovations you need? All these things are but there's nothing in the budget about it. There's nothing in anything. In Niti Ayog, any document, you will not get it. You will not. So, first is objectives. Growth rate is one objective. Reduction of poverty is another objective. Full employment is another objective. These objectives will come in the objectives. And then of this, which will you start with priority and then move on to the others? That also has to be stated. Then there's a question of strategy. What is the strategy? There's a Russian strategy which has failed. There's a Chinese strategy which has more or less failed. The American free enterprise strategy has worked, but whether you are willing to go that far, these have to be discussed. There's no discussion. What is your strategy? I want to know. And finally, where are you going to get the resources from? And there are plenty of ways of getting resources, but there's no discussion. So I will conclude by saying that we, in these four categories, we have once again failed. I don't blame the finance minister for it, because she doesn't. She's not part of the budget making. The budget making is done in the PMO by bureaucrats, and then it comes for a signature, and she does. I know that she does sign it, and then maybe she holds a press conference in which no press fellow is allowed to ask any searching questions. So, but our country today is in an economic mess, and that economic mess needs to be corrected. We may have another session on how to correct it. So over to Arvind, and who will go first? I don't know. Arvind, you will go first, or our guest should go first?
Dr. Chaturvedi.
Okay, Dr. Chaturvedi goes first.
Arvind, you have to unmute.
Huh?
Arvind has to unmute.
Is it unmuted?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Swamy. Though I wanted Debashis to go first, but anyway, since he has given me the mental, let me say, Dr. Swamy, you have been saying these things. We have discussed these things about any policy document should have objective and resources and priorities, and even how it is going to be raised. Let me just say, for a change, this time, though the budget may not have been prepared by Nirmala Sitharaman, and whether it is prepared in the PMO, at least they say on paper to start with that it is PM's vision of Amrit Kal. Now, what is this PM's vision of Amrit Kal except for saying that India is on the way to become the global superpower? Now, how it will become superpower, that has not been explained, of course. And the comment by our finance minister has been that it is one of the best balanced budget. Now, when we say balanced budget, I'll come to the details a little later. But when we say balanced budget, naturally, a balanced budget should be satisfying to the youth, the unemployed youth, especially the poor people, the farmers, the industrialists, and especially the MSME people, the small industries people, which contribute a lot to our economy. But the focus has not been on these five things. Though for a slogan, they have mentioned the Saptarishi, seven priorities, though they have mentioned in the very first page of the budget document. And some of them, some of the things which are mentioned in the budget, I will also say I liked it. But majority of the things show that government, in the government, the right hand does not know what to do with the left hand.
I think we might have lost him. Debashis, you can jump in right now, and
Yes,
then
I'll
if
do that.
yeah,
I'll do that. Uh, I was just thank you, Dr. Swamy and Dr. Chaturvedi and Mr. Swamy for organizing this and inviting me to say a few words. I would really I came here because anytime Dr. Swamy calls, I have to come. There is no question of saying no. So, but really, this is not a budget one would spend time analyzing. It is so pedestrian. It is simply a waste of time as far as I'm concerned. But uh, I would start with some numbers because ultimately it'll whatever you say, whatever the prime minister says or the finance minister says or whoever says what, ultimately, uh, um, according to me, it'll show up in the numbers. So the numbers can't be hidden, and over a period of time, there is a trend line of those numbers that cannot be hidden either, and that's really the truth. That's the ultimate truth. You can have all kinds of slogans. 10 years are almost getting over, and the numbers are not showing. So, one of the points that I have been coincidentally saying this, and ever since I started looking at how other countries have grown, and there is enough of literature now in how countries can grow and what has been there are empirical studies about different societies, different economic systems, but it is an inescapable fact. And when I was pointing this out, when I was very young, when I was in my mid 20s and so on, and I was to point out about the Southeast Asian countries, I was always met with a skeptical leftist view that you can't compare. India is a complex country, it's a very complex society. You can't compare it with Taiwan or Singapore. Singapore is a little dot somewhere like Calcutta. You can't really compare us with anybody. I said, I'm not comparing. I'm saying that there is something to be learned from there. And later on, when I started looking at the numbers, this was sometime in the early 2000 when our 2001 when our economic growth had dropped down to almost 4%, when the corporate leaders were still obliged to say that, well, 4% is still 4%. We are still better than the rest of the world, where the growth is about 1.5%. So my point consistently at that time, because I'd studied these economies, was exactly the same thing which Dr. Swamy is saying now, and he's been obviously saying that. But parallelly, I could see that if you don't have 10% growth for 10 years, you are not going to be able to bring out. And this is the crucial part. It's not about growth. It's not about growth for the sake of growth. You will not be able to pull out 25% of your people who are still below the poverty line in their lifetime. This is the objective that I would say that Swamy is probably talking about. At least in my view, this is the objective. In your lifetime, have you been able to pull out almost everybody from the below poverty line? Of course, given the nature of growth and the population and so on, someday we will we will become, we will have a lot of people who are above the poverty line. But it's taken, the point is that you can't be taking 50 years, 60 years. That's not justice. That's not the way, that is not economic justice. That's not fair for people to say that, oh, it will trickle down, wait for your turn, and so on. So you really need very intensive and very focused burst of growth. You can debate forever what kind of economic system or a governance system can deliver that. People can say that, oh, South Korea did it because for 25 years they were under military rule and Japan was a single party rule. All of those debates can go on. But the fact is that under whatever system you may have, you have to produce really very, very strong growth consistently year after year after year. That's the only thing that all of these countries share. So if you look at Taiwan has grown at 12-13% for 7 years at a stretch, when all of these countries were, in fact, they started in a much worse condition. I mean, think of Germany after World War II, think of Japan, which is completely destroyed after World War II. And these companies, without, harking back at the past, they just look forward. They got their act together. They worked with the same people who destroyed them, and they came out. They just, and the same thing Germany repeated all over again. I remember in 1989 when I was in Munich and I was talking to a Siemens senior manager, and he was cribbing about the East German workers who just got unified and they're very lazy, this, that. But his one last line was, but we have to make it work. They are Germans. And this is a thinking right through the entire. So that was actual nationalism at work, not the pseudo nationalism on Twitter that we see these days. So are we anywhere near to getting that kind of growth is where you should be targeting? I would say that, one of the points that Dr. Swamy forgot to mention, that they rigged the GDP growth calculation, which
Yeah.
is, so it is actually 2%, actually 2% lower compared to the earlier calculation, right?
That's right.
So if I was just looking at some numbers, which is 11% nominal GDP growth they've assumed in this budget. And I would say the inflation rate is about 6% or so. They are expecting it to come down, but I don't think we're going to see a secular decline in inflation, which we saw earlier for a variety of global reasons. We will probably see inflation going up and down. Just when you celebrate that the inflation is going down, it will jump up again. I think we've the world order has changed a little bit, especially after Ukraine. So I would assume a 6% growth in inflation. So it's about, we are only talking about a 5% GDP growth. So 5% GDP growth under the old calculation is about 3% GDP growth. We are back to the 3.5% Hindu rate of growth of the 70s. Effectively, these are government figures. These are not my figures. They are not my assumptions. All right. So this was not the promise of 2014. And even today, the talk is something else. People all talk about this global, all the hot air is about global superpower, $5 trillion, this, that. Numbers, which is what I look at, certainly does not seem to justify that kind of a hot air. Now, I was also surprised to see that they have assumed an expenditure growth of just 4.6% and a revenue receipt growth of only 4.8%. Now, last year there was a double-digit growth in terms in corporate tax collection, GST collections, and if you take the revised estimates. So I don't know if these numbers are true. Probably they think that nobody looks at these numbers, so don't bother. Jo hai dal do. But whether these are the numbers, then I'm afraid that we may not even hit 5% GDP growth. I don't know where that growth is going to come from. You wonder why there is no money for defense expenditure increase and so on. I noticed that I was very surprised to see that Ministry of Communication suddenly getting, that thing is going up by 70-80%. And I looked at it very closely. They are putting 45,000 crore in BSNL in this budget. All right. I mean, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. 45,000, the defense budget can't go up more than 4%. BSNL is getting 45,000 crore. This is such an incredible and such a complete waste of money. I'm not even sure whether nobody talked about it. Of course, it will mean a lot of contracts for private parties to supply cables, this, that, all of that. It's great. So fiber will be supplied. The switching equipment will be supplied. So it's great for companies which are listed in the stock market who are suppliers to BSNL. But it all finally is at our cost. I also noticed that the budget papers talk about a 52,000 crore to settle the previous liabilities of Air India.
Yeah, that's right.
52,000 crore. So you between these two figures, you have a 1 lakh crore which is going. So you wonder why there is no money for healthcare, why there is no money for defense. This is the singular reason. Now, the assumption in the corporate world has been, or people like us have assumed that for other reasons, the government has managed to pass on the Air India burden onto the Tatars. And I would have assumed that this passing on, because there were other deals, I would assume that this passing on would also mean passing on the liabilities. But it seems to me that, we can go deeper into it, but it seems to me that 52,000 crore liability was not passed on, which is now will have to be settled by us, the taxpayers. So I think this is quite serious. These two numbers, and they're large numbers. They're like 1 lakh crore, and this is the singular reason why we are talking about a fiscal deficit of 6.4%, which is extraordinarily high. And of course, people are so full of this promise of a 5 trillion and global superpower. Nobody wants to look at these numbers with a microscope or talk about it, or you're not even allowed to talk about it. Certainly not the mainstream media is allowed to talk about it anymore. Next point is that last year, we are outsiders. We really don't know what's happening inside the government. So one can only surmise. Last year, there was this very ambitious national monetization pipeline, right? Which the government said that, okay, these are the projects which are almost going to get over. We're going to monetize it by bringing in the private sector and freeing the capital, which is stuck there. And this year, in the entire budget papers, they've dropped that whole idea. There is no mention of national monetization pipeline anymore in the very next year. Now, this is not a surprise to me, because it's very difficult for the government to do any of these things. If they could, they would have done a lot of things in the last 10 years. They have not been able to do privatization properly. They have not been able to do any of the other resources. They talked about a lot of BOT projects for the railways, which has not moved. Mr. Gadkari keeps talking about from Marina in Bombay to bullet trains and so on, but it doesn't. None of these things have actually happened. Now, if for 9 years none of those things have happened, for the 10th year you talk about the most difficult thing on earth, which is a national monetization pipeline program at the central level, it worries me that, are they living in a la-la land? These are the people who are supposed to make policies. They are supposed to do things which affect us, all of us, and they are insiders. So how the hell did they have an harebrained idea like this? I mean, the idea per se is not harebrained, but in the context that in the last 10 years that you have not been able to do most of these things, how did they come up with this, which they had to promptly adopt? So this shakes your confidence about how deep the thinking is and whether they've thought through any of the things that they talk about. So it really spills over to the other things. Now, this is the rough observations I have about the budget. I'm not going to get into all kinds of small announcements which are purely cosmetic, which every budget does from the Congress budgets used to do, and they're continuing with this. So there is no change in the tradition. They're all useless small things, because there are 100 crore here, 50 crore there, and which takes up time, which takes up a lot of discussion time, and it's completely useless. I'll move away from the budget to look at another place where we could put our thermometer and see what's going on in the economy, and that is the current account deficit. Now,
Yes.
I don't know whether many people have noticed or not. Well, foreign news agencies have written about it, but CAD at 3% is the highest since 2012. In the last 10 years, we haven't added 3%. Well, I'm sure a lot of people will jump down my throat to say that it was due to the Ukraine war and the increase in raw material prices and so on. The fact is that even before the war, there was no trend in improvement in CAD. We have consistently been living beyond our means. We are not export competitive. We are competitive only in services export, which is a software part where the government has not intervened. They have not tried to do anything. So let people, and the technology has helped over there. The technological evolution hadn't happened, their services export would have stalled. The fact is that we are incapable of increasing our manufactured exports. For a long time, I remember people used to talk about textiles has turned the corner. The government has come up with the PLI scheme, this, that, which is complete nonsense because the entire area that China has vacated in textiles, because it has now become a higher cost, labor costs have gone up. That entire space has been taken over by Vietnam primarily and Bangladesh. India has not got even 1% of the area that China has vacated for the simple reason that we are not competitive. And we are not competitive because of our own internal policies, which, as Dr. Swamy rightly pointed out, owes to the initial model of economic growth that we started with, and we have not changed it. So effectively on the ground, it continues. It's the same model of growth that continues. A businessman faces same 50 licenses at the state level, the local level, the central level in each one of their activities. So essentially, they are not competitive, and so here I join up with another claim which they have not stopped claiming because they probably think that they have achieved it, or they can't claim anymore because the numbers don't show it, which is ease of doing business. So ease of doing business is no longer a slogan. Or perhaps because they think that they have done all the ease of doing business that's possible, but the numbers don't show it. And as I said, the singular reason why our manufactured exports are not competitive is because we do not have ease of doing business. Domestic, all input costs are very high, power, etc. And the government is getting bigger and bigger and needs more money, and that means less money for the more productive sectors of the economy. If you really divide the household, the government sector, and the private sector, the private sector is always the last in the queue in terms of, although their productivity is the highest, and the government always has the largest claim to resources, which is really the worst way of allocating resources, according to me. So, in a sense, the picture hasn't changed at all. The picture, if at all, has worsened because of the fact that growth is not going to be much higher. We have current account deficit, and inflation is not going to be tamed so easily. So fundamentally, these are the headwinds that we have, and if we have the same response to the same problem, we're going to have the same outcome, which is muddling along. So that is my piece.
Okay, thanks very much, Ramesh.
Yeah.
Back to Arvind. He got disconnected. So
when I was disconnected earlier, when I was disconnected for a moment, I was saying that the budget looks like that it has been prepared in parts by different people in different sections, and they do not know how to integrate these different parts, and the right hand in the government does not know what the left hand is doing, and this is reflected in many of the things which are contradictory in nature. Now, when I say contradictory in nature, actually, we can also quote figures, though Debashis said that figures are not so important. But, in general, when you look at the outlay on a particular aspect, and then the outlay has gone up or outlay has gone down, that reflects the direction of the government. Now, one very important thing which people have noticed and government has not been able to defend in last 2 days, and that is basically the 13,000 crores reduction in Manrega allocation. Now, as we have seen year after year, the allocation of Manrega has been going up because of the demand during the COVID times. There are a lot of migrants who went back to their villages and field. So there were money required for them. So Manrega was temporarily increased. But this year, 13,000 crores has been reduced in Manrega. That means either you are confident that rural people, there's a rural unemployment which is going down, which is not so. I mean, in fact, we have had the unemployment figures, if we look at it, maybe the worst in last 10 to 12 years. And same in rural areas. And the migrant laborers who had gone during the COVID time have not 100% come back. Therefore, the Manrega budget reduction speaks the poor vision of the government, number one. Number two, PM has been talking about, of course, 22 has passed. When he took over in 19, he said we will double the agriculture income or the farmers' income in 5 years or 3 years. The target was 2022, and 22 has gone. And the PM Kisan fund has gone down this year by 8,000 crores.
Yeah.
The crop insurance scheme has gone down by 18,000 crores. The only thing which has been maintained, but in fact, if you take into account the inflation, they say the Kisan Samman Nidhi, about 2 lakh crores has been spent on that. They gave some 6,000 rupees per year or something, which is peanuts actually. I don't know why 6,000 rupees are given for a large number of farmers. Instead, if they identify a targeted group and give little more, and even 6,000 rupees, if you look at the 6% or 7% inflation, it should have been increased, but that has not gone up. Second thing is, people say it was election year, but the government did not pay heed to this election and all that, and it's not a populist budget. If it is not a populist budget, why these 81 crore people are being fed? This ration is being given. This ration was being given in 2020 for COVID, and there were reasons which are well known. But again, I've been saying in our programs several times, I've asked this question, that on one hand, we say the poverty has been controlled to a certain extent. The poor have been brought over the poverty line. If this is so, then out of 140 crores population, who are these 80 crores people who are receiving the ration for the last 3 years? And if you think that we have gone back, we have come back, we have recovered from the COVID shocks, if we have, then this should have been reduced. But again, if it is not, I mean, maybe for populist reason, and Modi government wants to capture the attention of the people in terms of, they say they have spent 4 lakh crores rupees on this so far. But then they should have discontinued this, which is, again, I'm saying that right hand does not know what the left hand is doing. They always, of course, there are some good things also, though Debashis maybe he was reserved in his comments about saying figures. Of course, he was very, very critical, but there are some good things which I liked. And let me say, I don't know the effect will be seen in 1 year or not. The infrastructure outlay has been increased to 10 lakh crores, which is almost a 30% rise over the previous thing, and which is significant. And of course, even railways from almost 1.59 crores, this gone to 1.59 lakh crores to 2.4 lakh crores, which is also very significant. And some things which are showing the direction. It may be a particular department's job, but something which has been done in the case of green growth. They have given the slogan, the title as green growth, and they are especially incentivizing the states for alternative fertilizers. Alternative fertilizers are basically the organic fertilizers. So maybe the organic farming is being promoted, but if we are not making an allocation which is significant, there is no point in giving this direction, number one. Number two, they are also announced that 500 new plants will be created. They called it waste to wealth. Waste management is very important. And this under Govardhan scheme, the bioresources is going to be increased. This is also a very significant thing. One more thing the government has been claiming, even on the budget day, they said that for education, highest ever allocation has been done. 1.12 lakh crores has been done, which was slightly more than the last year, which was 1.0 lakh crores. But you see, this is going from 2.8% of GDP to 2.9% of GDP. This 8% increase in the education is actually insignificant. And why I'm saying it is insignificant is that in the NEP, National Education Policy, the target has been fixed at 6% of GDP. We know the 6% is not possible, and also education is a state subject. But if it is not significantly increased, I mean, there's no point in claiming that we are going to implement national education policy. Same with health. And the reason, of course, Debashis has very clearly said 45,000 crore to that VSNL. But I find a little confusing because according to the figures that have been given in the budget, only 1.23 lakh crores has been given to Ministry of Communication. Now, if this is so, then out of which 45%, I mean 45,000 crores, which is very significant, maybe about 30, 30, 37, 38%. And the second thing is what was Air India, which is also, it was a bad deal. And Dr. Swamy has been saying this for last 3 years, that how Tata has been favored in different things, including the Air India deal was again a questionable deal. But so much money being wasted, it shows the poor intention of the government, or it shows the government is not very serious about what it says on paper. Let me also mention again, as I said about Govardhan schemes and the waste plant scheme. For legal issues, they had initiated some time back e-courts, and a lot of money is being assigned. They say now we are going to from phase 2 to phase 3 of e-courts. I think this will be facilitating the justice process for the poor people who cannot afford to move from villages and other areas to the town where the courts are. And therefore, e-courts, I think it should be a larger fund should be allocated, so there will be faster justice on this. And agriculture. Now, this is one very important thing government has been saying. The one good thing is about the focus is on millets. They say India is producing 20% of the global production of the millets, and therefore the India will become a global hub. But the allocation does not say. I've already said about PM Kisan and the Kisan Samman. Food subsidy is again gone down by 9,000 crores. So the things which are shown on the government paper, on one hand, they are claiming something that they're doing good, whereas the figures speak of something else, which is very clear contradiction in the many things. Therefore, the direction of the budget looks to be confused to me, and that's it at this moment.
So,
Okay. Can I bring in a few questions, Dr. Swamy, or do you want to? Why don't you chime in based on what you heard, and then I'll bring in the questions.
well, I think we are almost three of us are broadly in the same circle, inside the same circle, in the sense that we find this is an unstructured budget, and it doesn't deal with the essential problems. And see, the question is one of the referring to what Arvind Chaturvedi said. He pointed out, so much allocation has been made and all. I think it's time now to treat the budget as more as what has been achieved in the last budget, because we have all these announcements are made and they're not implemented, and then they want to more new things that they're saying they're bringing. The issue should be much more in terms of what has been achieved in the past 5 years. And there must be some transparency, some truthfulness. Your growth rate is not 6.5%. You can frighten the IMF to go along with it. But ultimately, all these things come out. You see, the Chinese, during the Maoist rule, they used to claim 14%, 15%. And I remember my first book, which I wrote on India-China comparisons, published with the Chicago University Press. People, all the leftists pounced on me, but in the end, when Deng Xiaoping came, he told the truth, and the growth rate of China was no higher than India's during that period of Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi. So I think what we must now start asking is, oh, this is promised, that is promised. You please tell us what you have achieved in the last 1 year, and particularly in basic things like employment, to in terms of cost. People, the middle class has really cut its level of living by because the prices have gone so much. uh, Take the other thing, the rate of interest that is charged for loans. I mean, that hasn't come down. That's in fact gone up by 0.5%. So I feel that we are being mesmerized in every after every budget session, and then there's no accountability. And next year, there nobody says, I promised last year so much, so much, so much, but I was only able to achieve so much, or I achieved so much more. As that kind of a budget speech is what we need.
One more thing I would like to point out when I say there's a contradiction in the different announcement. Government has been claiming that government has done enough for the middle class by increasing the income tax rate from
Yes.
5 lakhs to 7 lakhs. New regime, old regime, of course that's too much of confusion, that salaried class people can opt for old regime and take the concessions and all that. But the thing is, when the government was allowing the tax rebates and certain things, for example, if you have insurance, if you have investment in public provident fund, and if you have investment in medical insurance and so on, those kind of concessions were given, and people were driven to savings because of availing those concessional benefits in the tax. Now that has gone. That has gone. So all the tax experts, all the savings experts have been saying since last 2 days after looking at this, that savings rate is going to go down. And as you know, Dr. Swamy has been saying that India has the one of the highest savings rates in the world.
Yes.
And maybe it has gone up to 32% at some time, though it is around 25, 26%. But after this budget, when this income tax rebate is not going to be given to the people, incentives, in fact, they are disincentivized for saving. So savings is going to go down, especially the young people. Now, on the second hand, as I said, contradictory. For senior citizens, they've increased the limit from 15 lakhs to 30 lakhs. For women, they have created a special scheme for 2 years for 2 lakhs rupees deposits and all that. But if this is the direction, then why the hell you have to de-incentivize the savings? So by cutting down the savings, the funds which are available to the government for development expenditure, that will also not be available. So this is one of the major follies, I would say, of this government, or de-incentivizing the savings.
Debashis, do you have any comments on the personal income tax piece?
No, I mean, it's by and large, it's little tinkering. It's better than what it was, but essentially, all of these things are not inflation. My pet peeve is the fact that all of these are very ad hoc, and there is no objective way of doing it. Because if you see the pension and the for the government employees is indexed. Okay, so that is indexed to inflation. Whereas here, whatever they plan to do, they will remain. Now, this last 2 3 years there have been some tinkering, but otherwise, for years together, it's a flat rate of something or the other. It is not a percentage to anything. It's not linked to anything. So where suddenly after 10 15 years, somebody will say, oh, but this was done so many years ago. This is too little. Then suddenly it will go up a little bit. So it's all very ad hoc and abrupt. So, other than that, I would say, so if you really look at from the beginning, there has been a much more positive movement in this under this government for both on the taxation for both for corporation as well as personal tax. Certainly, no question about that. But I would say for the corporates, that September October 19 was more of a knee jerk, because that was one of the lowest points, and they were complete. This is my guess. All right, I mean, I'm not a privy to, but I could see that this was out of the blue. While we are all debating taxation in the budget, this was halfway through the fiscal year, the government slashed the corporate taxation to an unprecedented level to kickstart the economy. That was more like a knee jerk. So it is the same whether during the budget, between the fiscal year, all of these changes happen without a very clear cut thought. I would say not just the points that Dr. Swamy has mentioned, but I've been saying it from the beginning, because I had also a lot of expectations from this government. Mr. Modi is in a sense an outsider. He's not part of the whole Delhi. So I thought that he would, the most smartest thing would have been in 2014 is to come up with a white paper to say that, listen, this is what I've inherited. I am not the one who set up all these, money, white elephants all around me, whether it's a public sector or so many schemes, Yojana, this, that, planning commission, blah, blah. I have not done any of these. This is a situation. This is what I've inherited. And all the fiscal deficit and etc. is because of this. And this is the path. In the next 10 years, you expect me to do, these are the milestones. So that they don't want to do, because then they become accountable. So it's taxation or any of these allocations is always completely ad hoc and pulls and pressures, and and suddenly there's a knee-jerk reaction. That's roughly the sense that I get, and this is no exception.
Yes, I'm sure it is ad hoc. If it's not ad hoc, then they should have at least taken the inflation into account. Now, even if we take the for Modi's regime 9 years average inflation rate of 6 to 6.5%, that 5 lakhs limit should have gone to 1.6 times raised to the power 9, maybe 1.8, which is 9 lakhs. So even if we go by the inflation rate, this is 7 lakhs is not sufficient. Number one. Number two, they have also helped the super rich. For people who are earning 5 crores and more, the 37% surcharge has been reduced to 25%. Effectively, it comes to about 4% rebate for the super rich people. So on one hand, you're saying you are pro-poor, you are pro-middle class. On the other hand, you are helping the super rich.
And there's zero for agricultural income.
Yes.
That zero is tax.
Yeah.
So it is the middle class which is getting all the hammering from this kind of a policy. You see, and they are the ones who are saving the most. At least raise the level of fixed deposit interest rate. Even that they have reduced in the past 4 or 5 years.
Dr. Swamy, the recent economic survey said that the inflation is like cooling down, or it's getting sustained. They were just playing with words, saying that it's in, don't worry about kind of a situation.
Okay, what did they say? Green shoots or something like that?
No, I'll see the exact words. They said that the inflation is it's something that we don't have to worry about. It is there. Yeah, so I had eased. It says the inflation and unemployment concerns have eased. That's the exact term that they use. But again, the inflation right now is about, according to their numbers, is about 6.8%, which is outside their comfort zone of 6%. And tomorrow there is again talk that the repo rate is going to be bumped up by another 25 basis points. How is this going to have an impact? So Dr. Swamy first, and then Debashis can jump in, and Arvind ji, if you want to jump in.
And the question is, if the question is, what is going to be the impact of inflation on the economy?
Yes, economy. Yeah. And it does this keep jumping up repo rates? Just mirroring America does not going to help. Are they looking at the Indian situation and making it different?
If the inflation, if there is a rise in prices, and this raises the rate of investment, and the investment is, the rate of savings, which is then when it is utilized, it becomes investment, and that investment produces a faster growth rate, then inflation can be stomached, saying that it's moving the economy forward. But here the problem is that demand is down. And therefore, you see, you have to persuade people to buy, which means you have to bring the prices down. And the prices down can be done in a number of ways. I mean, um, I personally believe that if you raise the, if you print notes in certain circumstances when the demand is low, it will boost the economy. In India, the problem is not so much the supply side, it's the demand side. The people who should be going to shops and buying all that, you see, is not happening. If you go to more automobile showrooms, you'll find them large numbers just standing there, rotting away. So that's why I'm saying if you do a budget, it should have economics in it. And economics it can only come as a starting point. Those 4 points, you say this is what I want to achieve. Then should be my first priority, second priority, third priority. Third is my strategy, and in the strategy, you have to know whether you are having a demand problem or a supply problem in the economy. And if it's a demand problem, put money into the hands of the people. Build roads and print notes. Say, and hand it over to the public. They'll go into these people who work on the road, these daily wage workers, they will go to a restaurant and start eating. And so the restaurant, will start making profits. So and so he will start employing some more people as cooks and so on. So the machine starts moving, but you must know exactly what is the way of doing it. You suddenly come to a budget. What is all that has happened in the last 10 years? And has been before, but I don't want to compare myself with what happened before, because that's not why we came to power, that we want to only do better than the other people. We have to have a transformation of India into a developed country which can challenge the Chinese, it can challenge the Americans, because we have such a manpower which is in skill. It is, it's world famous for its skill, hard work. So in that, we have to be very clear the policy framework, and the policy framework will be, you have to decide what is your immediate problem. The immediate problem is to make people buy, and the only way to make them buy is put money in their hands. I don't see why you have to reduce income tax. Just abolish it. You don't have income tax for 40% of the population, which is the agricultural sector. You and the rich people, they have chartered accountants, they'll get all tax exemption, this, that, deduction, they'll manage. But and the poor, of course, are below the poverty line, so there's no tax for them at all. So it's this middle class which produces entrepreneurs, scientists, innovators, all this kind of people. They are the ones who are suffering the most.
Debashis, you want to jump in? Just on inflation part.
Oh, your inflation. Yeah. So I don't think anybody has any ability to forecast either interest rate or inflation, because the repeated studies across the world have found that even professional economists get it wrong. There are year after year after year, there is a poll by Wall Street Journal, and every year, not let's say out of 65 people, 64 people have got it wrong. This is the story, and the forecasting will get worse now, because if this is another assumption, if the world order has changed, if what we have taken for granted, that has started from the the fall of the Berlin Wall, which is 1989 till now, we have got deflation. China has exported deflation around the world, low cost products and services, labor costs being low, the borders were open, people embraced global trade, people embraced foreign direct investment, the movement of capital and labor had happened in an unprecedented manner, which used to happen much earlier, when the world was less connected. Even then it used to happen. We got even in the early part of the 20th century it used to happen, or the late 18th 19th century it used to happen, even though communication was difficult, but because people could move freely. So the same thing happened at a much larger scale. And in the first huge benefit of that started trickling in, in the early 90s in the US, and then subsequently in the early 2000, when Europe, America, as well as Asia, all three parts of the world were firing on all cylinders simultaneously. The first time it has happened. It never happened like that. Earlier, always Asia was always a laggard, and America was doing well, and Europe had its own sclerosis in different places. So we we got rid of all those shackles, and there was this wonderful period of global trade and investment, which got a little bit of jolt in 2008, but then it recovered. But now a lot of people are talking about a very serious break in that process. China is no longer in the same country it was. US has significantly weakened. Europe has weakened. India has got a tremendous opportunity to take up that space, provided we can get our costs down and our demand up, which can, if these two things happen simultaneously, we are in a much better shape. We are better than others in our ability to handle this, because we are a little more mature economy. But as I keep saying, that given time we will improve, and we are improving in a slow manner. So we are in a better position than what we were 20 years ago. But I don't think that regime of global deflation and low interest rate is going to continue. There has been a significant disruption, and we don't know what's going to happen. But there is a strong feeling that regime has changed, and if that regime has changed, you're going to see bouts of inflation. Just when you think that the inflation is down, again it goes up, then again it's down. So you're not going to get a very easy handle on it. That whole secular decline of interest rate and inflation, that is not going to continue. It's like it will probably keep bumping along. And any situation where this is present, where there is a volatility, is very difficult to get a hold of. It's very difficult to forecast, because you're not able to clearly see a path of continuously lower inflation. As I said, we are this situation 10 years ago, it would have been really hard for us. Maybe we are in a slightly better situation to deal with it, but I don't think that policymakers uh, are ready to yet accept that there is going to be bouts of inflation, and they are not going to get a handle on it only with a interest rate policy. It is out of their hands.
One quick question, and Arvindji, you can conclude. Quick poll: do you think, are we going to see a recession, or are we already in one, or what do you see?
Well, US, recession is defined by NBER of the US as two consecutive quarters of
Quarters.
of shrinkage, right? So that is, I think, that has not yet happened. Okay, people are talking about it, but in my view, it's all headlines. You put the word recession in headline, you get eyeballs. Real life doesn't work like that. It's not depression, right? I mean, it's a slowdown. That's about it. Some people in America, they respond very quickly. People lose jobs, they start cutting their jobs and so on. Then they bounce back. One of the worries that people have is that the Fed will continue to increase interest rates even though the inflation has peaked. I think they are responsive to that. Last meeting, they increased interest rates only by 25 basis points. The Powell keeps talking tough because he doesn't want the market to rest and get over exuberant. So it's a strategy to how to control the mind of the market. So he's doing that. But I don't think in real life the word recession, with all the connotations of people are no money, no money to eat, and this and that, all of these things are not going to happen. Certainly it's not happening in the US. It's not going to happen here, at least unless we see some worse kind of shocks from here and there.
Arvindji?
And In a textbook, in terms of textbook definition, certainly we don't have, India does not have inflation because India is still growing for whatever it's worth.
I know there are 4 questions about Adani. I think this is not the forum. Sorry, folks, because we're talking.
No,
Yeah,
let me add one on Adani. In last episode, we had discussed this Adani case. And in that time, I have also mentioned that in our 177th episode on 20th November, and in the last episode also, I had asked that the government should come out with a white paper on how much money has been given as loan to Adani by different sets. I'm glad that RBI has taken note of this question, and RBI has asked all the banks now to give provide details of how much loan they have given to Adani and to which company of Adani. So I think something at least on the paper, if not white paper from the government.
There's a catch there. Because
Yeah,
the
go ahead,
petition
Ravi.
is pending in court. I know that every bank of any consequence has a Reserve Bank nominee as director who
Right.
participates in every decision, including which loans to give and to whom and so on. So the Reserve Bank now asking is to cover its backside. You see, they already know. You'll be surprised to know that any time a bank has been prosecuted or bank officials have been prosecuted or the directors been prosecuted, in the last 40 years, not even once the Reserve Bank nominee has been a part of the being prosecuted. And so my petition today that is lying there in the court, and which the government of India is refusing to, and they are not giving a counter. Particularly CBI, which I had made into party. The fact of the matter is that the Reserve Bank is as complicit as Mr. Adani is.
Debashis, you chime in quickly.
Yeah, I think that they just assume that nobody knows anything, and that's why they just say any damn thing that they please. If you just sit with any senior banker, he'll tell you that banks are supposed to file 150 different kinds of reports daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually with the RBI. All right.
Yes.
RBI is regularly inspecting the bank's books every quarter if they want to, special inspection, normal inspections. Banking is one of the most regulated activities in the world anywhere. Indian banks are, there is just impossible. In 5 minutes, an RBI officer, based on the material that already the banks have filed with them, in 5 minutes he can find out exactly which bank has given what loan to which company at what time. So to ask the banks,
Okay, so it's a cover up.
it's a joke. And both SEBI and RBI, not so much as insurance, but they regulate them so thoroughly, and yet there are scams. And yet, as Dr. Swamy has said, nobody from the regulators ever is questioned, is never put behind bars. There's never an investigation which finally nails anybody over there. They are complete. I don't know about Adani, but certainly from all the scams that have happened, I mean, regulatory complicity is a given. There's no question about that. Given the level of scrutiny that they have, formal, informal, it is given. There's no question of their not knowing and asking now. And if they're asking now, I would say that's a very poor kind of regulation because they already know.
Okay.
Okay, Arvind, please conclude.
Thank you.
10
This
minutes past.
discussion was on budget 2023, and you know that no budget can ever satisfy all the sections together. And but what we have been discussing in several programs earlier, when we had under Dr. Swamy a series of lessons on economics for the common man. At that time, we had also said that any policy document requires 4 items, which Dr. Swamy said in the beginning today. Thank you, Dr. Swamy, for bringing it again. And this minister has produced 5th budget. और ये 5वें बजट के बाद भी कोई भी एक वर्ग देश में नहीं है जो पूरी तरह संतुष्ट है. तो न किसान संतुष्ट है, न युवा संतुष्ट है, न जवान संतुष्ट है, न गरीब संतुष्ट है. And moreover, what is required is basically a direction. India needs to reduce inequality. When you are helping the super rich and you are not helping the people who are below poverty line, that means you are widening the gap. And this is what, if China can do it in 20 years, why can't India do it in 35 years? In fact, we started reforms in 1990, and it is almost 33 years since then. And we have not been able to, of course, COVID, you can blame COVID. For the time being, you can blame Ukraine war or whatever. I mean, you can find excuses all the time, but the budget exercise is one exercise which gives the direction to the economy. And we conclude today with the experts' view that budget has been directionless. It is not going to help anybody. We only hope. In fact, I hope when I have appreciated that the extra allocation has been given to the infrastructure, that this 10 lakh crores which has been given to infrastructure at least produces something next year in terms of employment. So let's hope whichever areas have been emphasized by the government produce some positive result. Thank you, Dr. Swamy. Thank you, Debashis Basu, for being with us. You have been in our programs earlier also. You spared time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ramesh Swamy. Thanks the technical team led by Ashish Shetty, Gadgi Rakesh, Ishwar Iyer, Vishal Mehta, Tejas, Swaminathan, and Ajesh Nair. We will be meeting again next Sunday, 12th February, 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time, with a new topic, Dr. Subramanian Swamy, and a new speaker. Thank you very much. Till then, Namaskar, Jai Hind.